I am most comfortable behind a music stand because that's where I spend my life. And contrary to whatever you may have heard from instrumentalists and singers, conductors are in fact musicians. So thank you. So let's start with a definition though. I looked up just to see what a definition online, a definition of a conductor. A person who directs an orchestra or a chorus. Yes, I do that. But my favorite definition came down at about number 5, and that was a lightning rod. Yes, that's what a conductor is, a lightning rod. So when they asked me to talk today, they said to talk about why you do what you do. And the thing about talking about why you do what you do is you've been doing this for so long, you forget why you started. And so I had to go back and back and back and back to figure out why did I start doing things, particularly the way I do them with my orchestra in Oakland. And I realized it started when I was 5, and my sister and my cousins and all the kids in our generation were brought together at one of my aunt's houses so that all the grown-ups could go attend the March on Washington. Now, I was 5 years old, and nothing is more fascinating to a 5-year-old than something you're told you're not going to go to. And we didn't go because at that time, you know, very different back in the 60s, no one knew whether this march was going to be safe. No one knew whether there was going to be any sort of violence. Nothing like this had been done before. So it's not like I fully understood the march. It's not like I understood Dr. King's speech. But I did understand that this huge crowd of people was coming together, radiating positivity, and trying to make the world a better place. And they have this really charismatic leader in front of them. So to make things happen, you need a lot of people. Okay, I understand that. In the middle of the 1960s, 1965 to be precise, I started taking piano lessons. And it was because my father had bought a piano from some neighbors who were moving away, and he got the neighbors to sell them their old clanky upright piano for $10. Now, that's $10 in 1960 dollars. That would be like 40 or 50 now. So we're talking real money. So piano is a really solitary pursuit, though. And about the same time, I learned about this thing called conducting, where you stood in front of people and you moved your hands and all this wonderful stuff happened. So I liked music, and I liked classical music, which hardly anybody else around seemed to really care that much about, certainly people my age. But that's what I wanted to do. At the same time, I wanted those crowds. So first of all, I started waving a pencil in the air to music. That certainly got me attention. And I thought, well, maybe I could go and make these things happen, make this music happen, and at the same time be the center of attention. I vaguely knew that there were black conductors. There was Dean Dixon, there was Henry Lewis, but I really liked this guy, Leonard Bernstein, because he seemed to have this really big career. I thought, I'll do what he does. And so I went off wanted to lead the world's great orchestras, travel to the world's great cities, and pursue every little boy's dream, world domination. So, my first regular job after college was at the St. Louis Symphony, where I was assistant conductor. Now, as the assistant conductor, you are most certainly not the center of attention in any way. But during that time, I was tasked with leading some free concerts outdoors by the rivers in St. Louis, where there were these enormous crowds. This was my first time standing in front of these huge outdoor crowds. And I learned from my boss at that time, the really quintessential American conductor, Leonard Slatkin, that if you turned around and talked to the audience just like you were talking to your friends, just say whatever comes to mind. That has gotten me in trouble from time to time. But say whatever comes to your mind. People really like it. They really think it's funny. They really connect with you. So I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I did like having all this attention focused on me. That's going to be your central point. center of attention. So, several years after that, I found myself the assistant conductor of the Chicago Symphony. And when I got there, I was really shocked at the polarization, racial and ethnic, in the city of Chicago. It's back in the 80s. In most of the neighborhoods in Chicago, if you drove through the neighborhood and you saw more than 2 people walking in that neighborhood, you knew who everybody was that lived in that neighborhood, because everyone lived in groups in these various parts of town. Now, there were a couple of really diverse neighborhoods, and I lived in one of those, but there didn't seem to be all that much interest in people coming together. So, I'm at the Symphony. I'm the first African-American artistic employee of the Chicago Symphony in its whole history. And so I took it upon myself to maybe try to improve the relationship between Black Chicago and the Chicago Symphony, because I was going around Chicago and I was finding there were people in the Black community who loved classical music and had never been to Orchestra Hall because they didn't feel welcome there. And that may have been true in the decades before, but by the 1980s it was far from true. They were very happy to have people there. And so I thought, okay, maybe this is my contribution I can make, is to bring more of Black Chicago into the Chicago Symphony. So part of my job at Orchestra Hall was running the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. Civic Orchestra of Chicago is the training orchestra for the Chicago Symphony. And the concerts were free. So this was my first chance to go out and build that big audience, that big diverse audience, looking at classical concerts. And I thought, oh, maybe there is a bigger point to this whole thing, a bigger contribution to make than world domination. Not to mention that the world domination field is pretty crowded. So, 5 years later, I had become the music director at the Oakland East Bay Symphony. Now, when I got to Oakland, the question in Oakland was, why does Oakland, California even need an orchestra? Why should there even be an orchestra there? If people wanted to see concerts, they could go to San Francisco, they could go to Berkeley, they could go to San Jose, they could go to Santa Rosa. So like any sort of business, and an orchestra is a business, despite the bottom lines of most orchestras, it is a business, you have to create some kind of a need for what you're doing. Now, Oakland is famous for its urban ills, but it also has a really vibrant arts community full of really adventurous listeners. But many of the art forms and entertainments that we have in the world, they are aimed at one slice of the population. They're aimed at a specific age. They're aimed at a specific race. They're aimed at a specific ethnicity. There's not a conscious effort to bring people together across those different lines. But I have a symphony orchestra, and a symphony orchestra has people who can do anything in it. And so if I program things that cause people to come and sit together, that put a variety of things on the same program, then I can bring people together and start to create a community. And that's, to my mind, the first thing I've got to do if I'm going to make Oakland a better place. And if I'm not going to make Oakland a better place, why am I running an orchestra there? Or why are you doing any business anywhere if you're not trying to make it a better place? So once you've got people together and you're sitting watching a concert or whatever together, you get to know each other, you see your common humanity, you see the strength you have in numbers. So I started looking around at our concerts and going, who is not here? Now, Oakland East Bay Symphony concerts were already more diverse. The audience was already more diverse than a lot of symphony orchestras, but still not as diverse as Oakland. And so what was born out of that, looking around and going, who's not here, was a series of concerts we call Notes From. Each year we play a concert that is notes from someplace in the world. Not just someplace in the world, but also a place that is connected to a segment of our community that is underrepresented in our symphony audience. So we'll do notes, we'll do a Notes From concert that has a standard repertory piece on it. You know, I have all, standard repertory, Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, all the famous dead people. We'll have one of them on the concert, along with featuring music from a specific other place. And that way you get the Beethoven lover together with the person who's coming to see this unusual repertory, and we're all being brought closer together as an Oakland family. So we did Notes from Persia. We did, by the way, the guy playing the spiked violin, as I'm calling it because I don't want to try to pronounce it. He is actually, he was between jobs that week because he had been, let me see if I have it in the right order. He had been one of the higher ups at Google, but he was moving to Facebook as one of the, right at the top of each one. And in between, he took a week off and played with a symphony orchestra. And the next year, when his birthday came around, I said to him, maybe this is the year you'll make something of yourself. So we did Notes from Persia. We had to do that a couple of times, actually, because it was so popular. We did Notes from the Middle East with Israeli and Palestinian musicians, and not a word of protest from anybody. That is the power of music. We had a stage full of people. We had Israeli solos, we had Palestinian solos, we had a Palestinian composer. It was the coolest concert. It was just great. So my other favorite thing about music is we will naively put together any groups of people. We are not afraid to anyway, yeah. We did Notes from India. That was recently. And on other concerts, we did Notes from China, Armenia. We did Notes from the Philippines. This year, we'll do Notes from Mexico, and we're adding dancers. We're going to other countries, but always the music is really interesting and really fantastic, but it's also to make a connection to a part of our community that we're just not as connected to as we would like. This is using a symphony orchestra as a community building mechanism. Classical music can be used for this because it's always been actually an extremely inclusive art form. Classical music is always trying to incorporate, some might say co-op, but anyway, always trying to incorporate music from the wider world into classical music. And that dates back to when Mozart was bringing Turkish music into his operas, and comes all the way down to when an orchestra that today might play with a live DJ, which we did at the Oakland East Bay Symphony, and we did it first. Thank you very much. So, any orchestra can do this, and every city needs an orchestra that is doing this. And if you have an orchestra and they're not doing this, you're not using it right. So this is the really important function of an orchestra, is to help build a community. And it can be done just really successfully. So my idea is that to bring large, diverse groups of people together so that they can have a feeling of community, so that they can think of each other as being part of a greater whole, and so that when they come to these Notes from concerts, they can never, ever look at any of these various groups of people as the other. We are all a big we. There's no them. It's just we. So then we want to take this energy and we want to push it forward to the next generation. So isn't the next generation adorable? We want to push it forward to the next generation. And this spirit of energy, the spirit of cooperation. And for us, we do that through our public schools, our urban public schools. And we have a program we call Music for Excellence, or MUSE, and we use that to connect young people. And I have my MUSE guys. Are my MUSE guys getting ready back there? I have my MUSE guys who are going to come, two of our MUSE students and one student from our Oakland Youth Orchestra. You guys can come on out and get set up. They're going to end this because I'm going to let them upstage me in just a moment. But the MUSE program brings young people together, connects them to each other, connects them to the wider world, and also shows them that there's a path from where they are to where we are, or to whatever they want to do. And I think we all agree that the more of this that they are doing, the better for the world. It's so much better than so many other things they could be doing with their time. So, this is the beginning of their little movement, their little crowd. They're coming together, and they're going to do great things in the end. So my point really This is the whole gang at the Oakland East Bay Symphony, and choruses, and again, I'm getting to wave my hands, and this wonderful sound is coming out of everybody. If you really want to harness wisdom, if you really want to shape the future, you need the power and energy of a crowd. That's my crowd right there. And that's what I set out to do after once I'd given up on world domination. I set out to make this crowd in Oakland, and we have this crowd, and when you make your crowd, you want to include everybody. So, gentlemen, take it away. They're going to play a bit of a Bach bourrée, and that's how we will make our way to lunch when they're done. They are, by the way, Jesse Pierce-Walker on violin, A.O. Pierce-Walker on cello, and Simon Hahn is playing violin. He's from the Oakland Youth Orchestra. They're from the Muse program. They're not quite old enough to be in Oakland Youth Orchestra just yet, but they're on their way, and they're going to play a bit of a Bach bourrée. Gentlemen.